Long before Monopoly, Risk, and Cluedo adorned the shelves of almost every home, medieval Europeans had their own set of board games and pastimes that they used as a way of coming together and entertaining themselves prior to our modern technological advances. While some of the most popular medieval pastimes, such as chess, remain today as a staple of tabletop entertainment, there are other, less well-known forms of historic recreation that you may have never heard of. Stick with us as we explore the world of medieval board games and pastimes in this episode of History Unveiled. Nine Men's Morris. Some medieval games were considered ancient even when they were being played 1,000 years ago. In the autumn of 2018, an exciting discovery was made at the Russian fortress of Vyborg Castle. During excavations, a clay brick was found with an etched game board on its surface, dating back to the 16th century. This medieval game board is a representation of a game that has a history dating as far back as 1400 BC. The game, known as Nine Men's Morris, is somewhat similar to modern-day checkers. Players would move their army of 9 game pieces, represented by different figures, across a grid-like playing field. The objective was to form a mill, or a row of 3 pieces, which would then allow the player to capture one of their opponent's pieces. The game would end if one player was unable to form a mill, or if a player lost all but 2 pieces. There were also variations of the game where players could use 3, 6, or 12 pieces. Evidence of Nine Men's Morris has been found in many different locations across the world, such as Greece, Norway, Ireland, France, Germany, and England, to name a few. It was a particularly popular game in medieval Europe and even earned a mention in Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Chess. Just as it is now, chess was a massively popular tabletop game in the Middle Ages.
Chess isn't always competitive. Chess can also be beautiful.
Long before the Queen's Gambit brought about fresh enthusiasm for the game, which some even consider a sport of sorts, medieval players of all classes were facing off one another in the classic game of strategy and planning. As you may well already know, chess is a game that has a long and rich history, dating back to ancient India and Persia. In medieval Europe, however, the game of chess began to gain popularity among the upper classes, particularly among the notability and the clergy. It was considered a game of skill and strategy, and was played by both men and women. During the Middle Ages, the game of chess went through a number of changes, with new pieces and new rules being added. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the queen as a powerful piece on the board, instead of the earlier version where the queen had limited movement. The introduction of the queen made the game more dynamic and added a new level of strategy to the game. As the game of chess became more popular, it began to be played in the courts of European kings and queens. It was also played in monasteries and in the homes of the wealthy. The game was also used as a tool for education, with many monasteries using chess as a way to teach young monks about strategy, logic, and critical thinking. In addition to its popularity among the upper classes, the game of chess also gained popularity among the common people. Chess was often played in taverns and other public places, and it was not uncommon for people to make wagers on the outcomes of a game. The unique popularity of chess in medieval Europe was due in part to its ability to entertain and educate, but also because it was a game that could be enjoyed by people of all social classes. Even to this day, chess is still seen as a special game in which talent transcends class and culture. Backgammon. Much like chess, backgammon is a game that has a long, rich history, dating back to ancient Mesopotamia, although it was particularly popular in medieval Europe. Still incredibly popular today, it's a game of strategy and skill that is played on a board with 2 players. The game is played with dice and pieces that are moved around the board according to the roll of the dice. During the medieval period, backgammon was another popular pastime among the nobility and the upper classes. It was often played in the courts of the kings and queens and in homes of the wealthy. Backgammon boards were often beautifully crafted and made from expensive materials such as ivory, wood, and gold. and these exceptionally crafted versions of the game made it a symbol of status of the upper class. That being said, it wasn't long before the common folk of the Middle Ages began enjoying playing backgammon with one another too, and it became another source of gambling in taverns. The game was so popular during the age that it was often depicted in art and literature of the time, with many illuminated manuscripts and frescoes of the period depicting people playing backgammon. Now, if you're enjoying this dive into the games and pastimes that medieval Europeans used to entertain themselves, be sure to head down and hit the like and subscribe buttons. It only takes a second, but it's the easiest way to support the channel and means you get to see more of the content that you find most interesting here on History Unveiled. Alquerque. Alquerque, also known as Alquerque, is an ancient strategy board game that was popular in the Middle Ages in Europe and the Islamic world. The game is thought to have originated in Egypt or Mesopotamia around 5000 BC, and it's spread throughout the Mediterranean region and Europe. The game is played on a board or a cloth with a grid of squares, and each player has a set of pieces that they move around the board. The objective of the game is to capture all of the opponent's pieces or block them so that they can no longer make any moves. The game is won by the player who captures all of the opponent's pieces or blocks them from making any more moves. While Alquerque was highly popular in the Middle Ages, its legacy lives on today as it's considered to be a parent game of modern drafts or checkers. Dice games. Dice games were a particularly popular pastime in medieval Europe, enjoyed by people of all social classes across the continent. Dice games have been around for thousands of years and were played by ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. They were also popular among the Germanic tribes and the Vikings. There is evidence to suggest that the earliest form of standardized gambling was centered around placing bets on games of dice, and by the 13th century, gambling in the form of dice games had become a popular form of entertainment and a common pastime at medieval banquets in Europe. One of the most popular dice games in the medieval era was Hazard. The game was played with 2 dice, and the objective was to roll a specific number. Players would place their bets on the outcome of the roll, and the winner would take the pot. This game was enjoyed by people of all social classes and was commonly played in taverns and other public places. Another popular dice game was Chuck-a-Luck, also known as Birdcage. This game was played with 3 dice and a cage. The cage was a small cylindrical container with a handle, and inside it would contain 3 dice. Players would place their bets on the outcome of the roll, and the winner would take the pot. This game was particularly popular among the lower classes who could not afford to play more expensive games. Dice games were also popular among the nobility, and many royal courts would have their own dice games. These games were often played for high stakes and were considered a game of skill and strategy. The game of dice was often depicted in art and literature of the time, showing its popularity and cultural significance. Medieval Europe also saw the invention of a few different dice games, such as Crown and Anchor, Knucklebones, and many, many more. Each of these games had its own unique set of rules, strategies, and ways to win, and all of them entertained greatly during the Middle Ages. Kings, Queens, and Cards. Medieval Europe was a time of chivalry, courtly love, and card games. That's right, one of the most popular pastimes of the era was playing card games. If you were to enter a medieval tavern, chances are you'd find people huddled around playing games of cards. Some things never change. The first playing cards we know of were invented in China during the Tang Dynasty from 1618 to 1907 AD and did not make their way to Europe until the 14th century. Once cards arrived in Europe, they quickly became a sensation. Nobles and commoners alike were entranced by the endless possibilities of these new games. One of the most popular card games of the time was Tarocchi, a precursor to the modern tarot cards. It was played throughout Italy and France, although it had a variety of different rules depending on the region. Another popular game was Kartoffel, played primarily in Germany. It had a unique feature where players could change the suit of the card they were playing, leading to some wild and unpredictable gameplay. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of medieval card games is the game of Primero, which is considered to be the granddaddy of all modern card games. It was played throughout Europe, and its descendants include poker, bridge, and even solitaire. So next time you're shuffling a deck of cards or facing off a friend in chess, think back to your medieval forefathers who may well have been doing the very same. Make sure to check out the rest of the channel for more videos on the details of everyday life during the Middle Ages. And don't forget to subscribe so we'll see you next time on History Unveiled.